Hello, welcome to Workplace Wake Up. I'm Jen Shaw. Every week, I spend about 15 minutes covering legal developments, introducing you to interesting guests, and providing some entertainment to start your workday. Okay, so my daughter, as many of you may know, is in 8th grade. I cannot believe it. She is growing up, and we are doing this really cool thing this year called independent study. And she was going to a great school, but I just felt like it would be good to get her a little bit of extra attention before we go to high school. And it's really fun. We decorated a little part of our office here for her to be working. And we have a teacher, one of her old teachers, who's fabulous. He is teaching her. And then she has a wonderful math teacher, her old math teacher, who's amazing. Anyway, it's pretty cool. Okay. It's going to be a great year. And so far, so good. We're about a month into it, and it's pretty amazing. So what does that have to do with fairness, the topic of the day? Well, here's the interesting thing. When Ella and I first started talking about doing independent study or homeschool, it's not really homeschool because I'm not teaching her, but independent study, whatever you want to call it. She said, Mom, how are you going to make sure that this is fair to everyone? And I said, gosh, what do you mean fair? And she said, well, you know, like maybe my teachers don't want to just have me as a student. Like, what if they don't want to do that? And I said, well, Ella, they get to make that decision, right? By the way, they were knocking down the door to work with her, so this is not a problem. But she was very worried about fairness. And we started talking about what does it mean when we talk about fairness? And then it got me thinking about equality, because we've also been talking a lot about equal rights, equal treatment. Ella is very interested in the civil rights era and Dr. King and what all of that meant. And obviously, I'm far from an expert, but we talk about the kind of training we do on equal employment opportunity issues and what equality means. And it dawned on me as I was having this conversation with her, the difference between fairness and equality. Okay? So let me give you an example. When you talk about equality, all right, let's look at the Americans with Disabilities Act. Okay, this is a law that says if somebody has a disability, you're supposed to reasonably accommodate them if they're what's called a qualified individual with a disability. In other words, if they are able to perform the essential functions of their job with or without reasonable accommodation. Okay? Now, that means that if I'm a qualified individual with a disability and I tell you I can't work on Wednesdays because I'm getting treatment for my disability and therefore I need Wednesdays off, even though there's a policy in the company that says nobody gets Wednesdays off. That's the busiest day of the week for us. We can't possibly give you Wednesdays off. You may need to give me a Wednesday off because I have a disability and I'm entitled to an accommodation. And unless giving me that Wednesday off, this one person, just me, imposes a substantial hardship on you, you're going to have to give it to me. Now, somebody who works with me is going to say that is unfair. Why does Jen get Wednesday off and I don't? That's not fair. Okay, well, it isn't fair. I mean, let's be honest. Somebody else wants Wednesday off to go watch their daughter in their ballet class or go watch their child playing Little League. They're not going to feel like it's fair that Jen gets Wednesdays off because of her disability. It's not fair, but it's equal. And what I mean by that is equality. Both of us, me and the person who wanted Wednesday off who's not going to get it, we're both being treated equally in terms of being given the tools we need to do our jobs. I need Wednesday off to do my job. My coworker, let's call her Paula, doesn't. There is a difference between being fair and being equal. So before I had children, and still, my niece and my nephew are just the apple of my eye. I adore them. And I would try very hard for their birthdays and the holidays to give them equal presents. And my sister always said, and she was so right, wait a minute, what is equal? What do you even mean? One of them wants surf lessons and one of them wants to go to Chicago to the American Girl doll store. Okay, you're not going to add up the expense of both of those and make sure that you're giving somebody, one of them an extra $1.17 to make it equal. What you're going to do is you're going to do what they want to do within reason, within what you're capable of doing, and understand that they're being treated equally because you're giving them each your equal attention, right? You're putting equal effort in doing what you're doing. Could somebody from the outside say, well, guess what? It costs a lot more money to fly to Chicago and go to the American Girl doll store than it does to go surf a few waves down at the Hook? You bet. You bet. But it's not about fairness. In the workplace, it's about equality. The law doesn't deal with fairness. The law deals with equal treatment. And that doesn't mean the treatment will be the same. Because I'm going to get the Wednesday off and Paula isn't. My coworker, even though she wants it off really bad, she really wants it off. She's not going to get it. Okay? So are we being treated equally? Well, we are in terms of being given the tools for our job, but we're not being treated the same. One of us is getting the day off, the other one isn't. So when we look at fairness in the workplace, think about how it's used in the law, right? We have fair pay rules, right? Particularly in California, but throughout the country. Rules that say, okay, guess what? If two people are performing substantially similar work under the same conditions, they should be paid the same. And they certainly shouldn't be paid differently based on their race or their color or their national origin or their ancestry, based on a protected category, right? Fair pay is about giving equal pay for equal work. Now, there are some situations when it's okay to pay somebody differently. They have more experience. They're in a different geographical location. When I first got a job as a lawyer, I made a certain salary in Sacramento. People doing the exact job, working on the same cases as I was, exact same cases, in our San Francisco office made about 25% more. It didn't feel fair, but it was. There was a different cost of living in San Francisco, and that was the firm's justification, and that was a legitimate justification. Didn't mean I liked it, didn't mean I thought it was fair, but there wasn't anything illegal about it. We don't have to treat everyone the same to be treating them fairly, okay, or equally. So I want you to understand these terms get thrown around all the time, right? Fairness, equality, treating people the same. What you have to do as an employer is understand the underpinnings of everything you're doing, every policy you're implementing, every decision you make. Why are you doing it? What is your legitimate business reason? What is your rationale? Do you have one? Can you prove it? Do you have documentation? So a client called me earlier this morning from New York. It's a client who I think listens to the podcast, so I'm going to need to keep my facts spare here. But here's the deal. He calls me and says, this employee we've been talking about, Jen, it's time. I need to let them go. Okay, got it. Did you do what I told you to do 6 months ago? Did you give them a performance improvement plan? Did you set out your expectations? Have you been documenting what's going on? I don't have time to document, but give me an hour and I'll whip it up. I said, no. That's not what I mean. You have to have contemporaneous documentation of when it happened. So you can show you're making a fair, legitimate decision. That doesn't mean you're treating them equally necessarily. It may be that somebody in the mailroom is going to get a little more leeway on the attendance policy than the receptionist, because I need the receptionist to be at their desk, bottom end chair at the start time when the phones start ringing. The mailroom person, well, if they're a few minutes late, they can work a few minutes late at the end of the day. It's not going to be the end of the world potentially. Now, I got to be honest, as many of you know, if you know me, I'm a stickler for time, but not everybody is. That doesn't mean they're being treated equally, but it's not unfair. Their jobs allow the employer to have a different rule. Okay, so fairness and equality are different concepts, and it's important for us to understand them. So when you do equal employment opportunity training in your organization, many states require this training now, EEO compliance training, not just California, not just New York, lots of states. Be very careful the words you use. When you're talking about equality, fairness, make sure you explain what it means and why it matters. We make lots of decisions in the workplace that people are not happy with. They disagree with them. They don't like them. That doesn't mean we have a legal issue. We will have a legal issue if we're not following the law. So what do equal employment opportunity laws require? That we treat people equally. And there are only distinctions that are made for legitimate business reasons, which always will be your burden to prove as the employer. So back to our independent schooling, one of the things that I think is so interesting about the school system, I used to be a school teacher, and it was so unfair. When I went to different schools, I was a substitute teacher. This is way before I went to law school, decades ago. I would go to one school in one school district and it would be so fancy. They would have books and paper and fancy felt tipped pens and the most amazing playground equipment. And then I'd go to another school in another district and there'd be nothing, not a tetherball, not a Foursquare ball. I had to go out and buy my own paper for Valentine's, right? That isn't fair or equal. And there are laws that say it's not supposed to be that way. But it is, right? The world isn't fair. And as an employer and as an HR professional, you've got to be able to draw the line between your legal obligations and what you just think might be morally correct. I literally stopped teaching because I couldn't stand anymore the thought that kids were being treated so differently based on where their parents lived or where they were living. It just wasn't fair and it wasn't right. And I couldn't change it. There's nothing I could do about it. I want you to think in your organization, where do we make distinctions? Where do we draw the line? Where do we treat people differently? And do we have a legitimate basis for doing that? And if somebody questions us, if somebody says, you know what, you might say you have a legitimate basis, but I don't think you do. Can we prove it? Do we have documentation? Do we have support for what we're doing? Written support, something we can rely on. That's what's important, right? I just started watching the series Suits on Netflix. I think it's on Netflix. And I've never been a big TV watcher, but somehow I got roped into watching a couple of these series. And this one's like 8 seasons long. I can't even believe it. And it's really weird to see Meghan Markle, by the way, in that role because I've never seen it. And now that she's married to Prince Harry, it's just so interesting. Anyway, that's a different topic. But the big shot lawyer in the firm who's working with the new lawyer who says he went to Harvard but didn't really, tells him to go get some information. And the kid comes back with the information. And the partner says, well, where's the information? And the kid says, I just told it to you. And he said, no, I need it in writing. I can't put you on the stand. You got to get me some documentation. That's right. That's what it's all about. You've got to be able to show what you're doing. And you know what? In life, fairness matters. Equality matters. We want to do the right thing. You want to do the right thing in your organization as well. Take some time before the end of the year to review your policies and procedures. And really think it through. I don't mean a cursory review of, did we include bereavement leave now that it's a law in California? I mean, really look at your practices and your policies. Are they fair? Are they appropriate? Are they valid? Is there a legitimate business reason for them? And can you back it up? It's a great thing to put on your to-do list for the end of the year. Not like we don't have enough to do, right? We're already working on legal update materials. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me here today. It is my honor and privilege that you share these few minutes with me once a week. If you have ideas or suggestions for the podcast, I'm all ears. Go out and do something nice for someone today, you guys. Thank you so much. Be well. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to spread the word, please share it with others, post about it on social media, and or rate and review it. Of course, you can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, and email us at info@shawlawgroup.com.
Workplace Wake Up, including its guests and hosts, do not provide legal advice in this podcast. Do not act upon any of the information discussed in this podcast without consulting a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction.